Chapter 171. Fudge coming clean. Although Michael was glad that he came into possession of hundreds of kilos of cacao beans, he was still clueless as to how it all happened. He thought that cacao beans were already nearing their extinction with the current landscape caused by the recent earthquakes, but it seemed as if the orcs had their own plantation that could harbor plenty of cacao seeds for them to harvest. Michael watched as the Orcupine tribe returned to their side of the forest with only one thing bugging his mind. Fudge? I think I deserve an explanation here. A violet blob emerged victoriously from the shadows. He had his blobby hands on his non-existent waist, with his non-existent chin raised high as if waiting for the upcoming praises from Michael. Hee, master. I was able to spread my clones to the orcs when I saw them at the meeting. Fudge began to describe his heroic and a little bit exaggerated story of how he infiltrated the tribes and manipulated them from the inside. He even weaved in a few stories about how he skillfully avoided being caught a few times, being a good ninja and all that. Michael listened and finally learned about the orcs' sacred grounds. Why do they have so many cacao beans? Michael asked. But Fudge, being too excited about his reward of chocolates, didn't pay much attention to why the orcs treated cacao beans with such high regard, even calling it their sacred grounds. Chat JK3. Does their diet consist mainly of cacao beans? It is highly unlikely. There is not enough nutritional value in cacao beans for them to sustain their large stature. However, there is not enough evidence to fully prove this. It is best to awaken one of their talents for the software to fully comprehend the physiology of the orcs and their correlation to cacao beans. There is also a large possibility of learning lots of physical arts from the orcs, as it is what they mainly use on a day-to-day basis. Michael didn't want to awaken their talent before he fully solved their civil war and integrated them into the nation of Reborn. So, ChatJK3's suggestion would have to wait for a little bit. How did I do, master? Am I a good ninja, hee? Fudge closed his eyes and waited for the showering of praise and love from Michael. Yet a few seconds passed and there was only silence from his master. Master. So let me get this straight. The reason why the orc tribes are giving me cacao beans is because you goaded them into competing against each other. Yup, Fudge said proudly. You did this knowing that I wanted them to make peace with each other and end their civil war? Nope. The ninja slime, upon realizing that he may have inadvertently made the two tribes hostile against each other again, looked depressed. Did Fudge do bad? A large gust of air puffed out of Fudge, slowly deflating into a puddle of violet water. Michael chuckled and patted the little guy. How could he get mad at his cute pet? Nah, you did fine, he consoled Fudge. You helped me out a ton by giving us more cacao beans to make chocolate with. Your method is a little bit shady, but either way, good job, buddy. Fudge slowly gained shape again, being filled solely from Michael's praises. Really? Yup. And now that you've gained the trust of the orcs, I want you to spy on them and find out why they have such a huge grudge against each other. You're the only one who can do this, so I'm counting on you. Okay. The violet slime jumped up and quickly transformed into his ninja outfit in midair. Of course, master. Thy will be done, Fudge said hoarsely, creating a serious atmosphere for himself. His turnaround was so quick that many would think his previous depressed state was nothing more than a lie for pity points. Fudge quickly returned to Michael's shadow and continued his ninja missions. Meanwhile, Michael had the Dragonborns move the cacao beans inside Neo Orcus, where he could process the cacao beans into chocolate. Many locals and Rebornians gathered at the center of their town to watch Michael process the bitter cacao beans into the sugary sweetness of chocolate. Michael did this publicly because he wanted to teach the locals of Neo Orcus how to make chocolate of their own in the future. After all, he was planning on making this the primary exported product from this town. It would give Beth and others a chance for their talents to shine. After all, chocolate was a flexible ingredient that could be added to any food, either cake, bread, or even water. The business possibilities of chocolate were endless. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the forest, deeper into the Queen's region, there was a gathering of a few peddlers carrying large rucksacks on their backs. These were the very same peddlers who had run away at the sound of the orcs' ritual shouting against each other. Although they were scared to death from the potential threat of the orcs, as well as the dangerous terrain ahead of them, these peddlers decided to come back and risk their lives to help the poor inhabitants of Orcus Town from starvation. As peddlers, they were the only ones who could supply Orcus Town with enough food to last for at least another month. If they didn't come back, then they would be leaving Orcus Town to die on their own. They couldn't leave that on their conscience. So they came back, and miraculously the shouting from the orcs seemed to have stopped. Even as they traveled deeper into the forest, there was no sign of shrieking and taunting echoing in their ears. They are gone. This is our chance. We must help Orcus Town. This gave them the courage to go deeper into the forest until finally, they came across the territory known as Orcus Town. Yet, as they came closer, they noticed that something was wrong. Orcus Town was too busy. Chapter 172. Cookies. Michael raised his hand and levitated the cacao beans from the sack before using an ember spell to roast them right in front of everyone's eyes. The children's eyes glazed with amazement as Michael then cracked these beans to reveal a dark nib with a similar smell to the chocolate they were all so familiar with. And with the cacao nibs gathered in one place, Michael destroyed their very chemical structure and turned them into a liquid with a smooth texture and flavor. It didn't take long before the liquid ball of pure chocolate hardened into bite-sized pieces for everyone to enjoy. Yee-hee! Gimme! So good! Zion and the children jumped up to try and catch the chocolate raining from the sky. But Jaco simply opened his palm and let one fall right into his palms. Meanwhile, Omisu and Shiina sharply snatched pieces from the air without anyone noticing. Yuna and her demi-human escorts were given one as well, and they enjoyed it more than any other royal candy or snack famous in the Queen's region. Michael had distributed the chocolate pieces equally but left a few for himself. He had other plans for these. While everyone snacked on the pure and sweet chocolatey goodness of the processed cacao beans, Michael walked over to Beth and requested her help. "There's a recipe that I want you to try out. Can you make it?" he asked her. Beth's talent was baking, and Michael knew that there were a lot of recipes from his old world that were only enhanced by the addition of chocolate. The best example of that was none other than chocolate chip cookies. Michael whispered the recipe he got from ChatJK3, with Beth slowly nodding her head as she began to realize the potential of such a product. "Leave it to me, Michael," she said, putting on her apron. "I will make cookies." She returned to her bakery and began preparations. Michael gave her all the necessary ingredients such as eggs, flour, and other such necessities, which meant that all she had to do was to put it all together. Even though techniques like whisking and folding were new to her, her natural talents in baking came through, and she was able to perform them quite well despite it being her first time. When she put the dough into the oven, she didn't even need a timer for her to know that it was done. As soon as the rich aroma wafted through her nose, she knew that it had finished cooking. She took the tray out of her oven and was greeted with the mouth-watering sight of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. She hardly believed that it was something that she made. She took one out and took a bite. It was soft and chewy on the inside, while still having a crisp outer layer. And as soon as she bit into one of the chocolate chips embedded into the bread, a rich mixture flooded her taste. Michael couldn't wait and took one for himself. And the taste immediately brought him back to his previous life, when his parents gifted him cookies on his birthday. "Michael boy, this cookie is so good, right?" Despite wanting to eat more, Beth immediately cooked up another batch of cookies, knowing that the kids and the locals of Neo Orcus would want more once they got a taste of the cookies. And as she did, the fresh smell of cookies wafted over the whole territory, making people curious as to what Beth was cooking up in her bakery. "Lord Michael, we smelled something from here." Shiina knocked and opened the door to the bakery. She tried to act serious, but her eyes kept wandering over to the freshly baked cookies on the tabletop. "Shiina, you're just in time. Tell everybody that the cookies are done. Here, have one." Michael tossed her a cookie. She regarded it curiously before taking a bite. And as soon as she did, her white scales began turning pink, a sign of her getting flustered. She immediately left the room, not wanting Michael to see her in such an embarrassing state. But before she could take another bite from the amazing cookies, Jakku snatched it right out of her hands and finished it himself. Good. You. As the two dragonborn siblings fought, more and more people began entering the bakery and leaving with huge grins on their faces while nibbling on their chocolate chip cookies. It didn't take long before everyone in Neo Orcus was snacking on cookies for the whole day. Thankfully, there were a few other bakers/chefs who helped Beth deal with the demand for cookies, especially from Zion and his little minions. The next day, Shiina once again knocked on Michael's door to alert him of a new presence in town. "Lord Michael, we have new visitors." Michael groggily woke up and opened his supreme skill, Unity Gathering. He thought it would be another shipment from the orcs, but as he focused on the light energy on their bodies, Michael realized that they were humans. He got off his bed and welcomed the new strangers in their midst. Meanwhile, the peddlers stopped just a few steps away from entering the walls of Neo Orcus. Their jaws were dropped, with confusion and shock written all over their faces. "This is not Orcus town. It's supposed to be," the veteran peddler replied. Instead of seeing the rundown town with degraded walls and buildings, the peddlers were seeing something completely different. They saw new white walls surrounding the territory, in pristine condition and an even better quality than any of them expected. Not only that, but the roads here, despite still being under construction, showed signs of being even better than stone roads in the capital cities of the Queen's region. The whole of Orcus town was lively, with people and demi-humans working side by side as they poured their blood, sweat, and tears into rebuilding the town in better condition. In their dazedness, they saw a strange dragon-like demi-human approach them with a brown circular thing in his hands. "Yo, want a cookie?" Chapter 173, Peddlers from the Queen's region. "Excuse me, is this Orcus town?" they asked the demi-human cautiously. Zion pondered. "No, this place is called Neo Orcus." "Ah, so we were wrong." "No, wait, that's right. Neo Orcus used to be called Orcus Town before we arrived here," Zion said, nibbling on his cookie casually, not knowing he almost caused a huge misunderstanding. The peddlers whispered to themselves, shocked at the revelation. They couldn't believe it. Literally. "Are you sure? This looks completely different from what I remember," the veteran peddler said. He was part of the elder generation that still remembered the good old days of the Golden Road. This was not the Orcus town he remembered. "You guys want to see for yourself?" Zion said in a dare, inviting them in to prove them wrong. The peddlers looked at each other and slowly walked forward. They stepped foot onto the half-finished concrete road, surprised at its solidness despite it being so flat. It looked like they had used a really big slab of stone. The streets, although still under construction, were designed with brilliant architecture, complete drains, and curbs. There was even a weird pole at the end of every street that looked like it had green, orange, and red glasses on the top. "What's that?" they asked Zion. "That's a stoplight. But you won't understand that yet." They continued to walk through the streets until they saw large metal pipes getting levitated by demi-humans and being installed inside houses under construction. As they connected underground, these pipes suddenly burst out with a spray of blue clear water before the demi-humans twisted a lever and stopped the flow. "Water? I thought Orcus Town only got theirs from rain. This is weird." Just then, a human came over to the demi-human workers and gave them a box containing meat and vegetables still smoking just a few minutes after being cooked. "Here's your food," the human said, and the demi-humans thanked her in turn. One of the peddlers finally couldn't hide his curiosity any longer and confronted the woman. "Excuse me, but how does this place have food and water? Orcus Town was supposed to be under starvation and dehydration, but it looks like everyone here is well-fed and healthy." The woman nodded and sighed in relief. "We were supposed to, but thankfully, the Reborn Company saved us from that terrible fate." "Reborn Company," the peddlers muttered under their breaths. Business was supposed to be their bread and butter, their specialty. Yet they couldn't remember anything about a company with these kinds of resources. "An overseas company?" the veteran peddler pondered. "Why does everybody think that?" "No, our boss is a human. My bro is the richest human in the King's region," Zion bragged. The peddlers showed yet another confused expression. It had only been a few years before they came back from the king's region, and they hadn't ever heard of this company before. So, it was hard for them to believe that such a company would suddenly pop up in just a few years. Beep beep. As the peddlers tried to make sense of what they were currently witnessing in Neo Orcus, they suddenly heard a blaring sound coming from behind them. When they turned around, they saw these metallic box monstrosities that looked as huge as a boulder, coming towards them at a pace even faster than horses. They were stunned, unable to move away from the incoming horde of Reborn automobile trucks coming from the highway roads. Zion had to pull them aside to the curb, letting the peddlers fall to their butts with horrified expressions on their faces. What was that? The truck stopped just on the other side of the street. A few seconds later, the front door opened and the driver climbed down off the truck, revealing his short and stocky nature. A dwarf? They all screamed. Yeah. Got a problem with that? The dwarf screamed back at them, annoyed. Don't stand still in the middle of the road next time. The dwarf shook his head and began to unload the tons of metal pipes from the truck, ignoring the shocked stares from the peddlers. But that's how? Zion flashed a smug smile. Believe me now? Haha. Everyone is always surprised when they find out Bro Mike was able to ally with the dwarves. All their questions were answered by Zion's bragging. But the peddlers simply couldn't believe the truth. Nobody in the Queen's region would believe it. Yet, the fact that a dwarf was right in front of their eyes was proof enough. They stayed silent for a few seconds, digesting everything they learned just a few minutes after entering Neo Orcus. All in all, everything came down to the Reborn company. They never knew that a sleeping dragon was hiding in the countryside. Everyone in the Queen's region was clueless that such a company was even able to be friends with the notoriously unfriendly dwarves. Are you guys okay? Just then, a human boy with golden hair walked up to them and offered them his hand. We're okay, kid. Just trying to figure out how this Reborn company was able to do all of this. Well, just ask. The boy replied to them casually. No, the veteran peddler denied. It will be hard to get an audience with the owner of this Reborn company. They must be on the same level as Eyes and his likes. Shiina smiled and approached the peddlers. You have been given an invitation by Lord Michael. There is no other greater authority in the Reborn company other than him. The peddlers hurriedly stood up and fixed their attire. That would be great. Where can we meet him? Shiina smiled and gently guided their gazes toward the young boy with the golden hair. This is Lord Michael. He is who you're looking for. The peddlers were once again slack-jawed upon finding out that this boy was more than what meets the eye. Come, Michael said. We have some business to discuss. It's my understanding that you are peddlers navigating the Queen's region. Am I right? Well, it just so happens that we have a few products we'd like to spread over there. Chapter 174. Chocolate Merchants. The peddlers followed Michael over to his house, with the Dragonborns and the elderly locals of Neo Orcus following closely behind. And the whole time, the peddlers couldn't help but stare at the small stature of Michael, their minds still undecided if what they were seeing was an illusion or not. Once they were inside, Michael invited them to lay down their rucksacks and sit on his couch. Forgive my rudeness, but are you really the owner of the Reborn company? How old are you? Did you perchance find a rejuvenating potion that turned you back into a child? Because I simply cannot understand. The veteran peddler let out all of his questions at once. He had been holding onto his curiosity for far too long. Michael chuckled. Please, I'm only turning 12 years old, but yes, I am the owner of the Reborn company. The peddlers would have questioned the authenticity of his words, but the mere fact that 5 dragon-like demi-humans were standing at his sides was much better than any authenticity paper that he could present to them. Earning the respect and loyalty of the draconic race was not something a normal human could do, even if they had the money. Let's get to business, shall we? Michael signaled over for Shiina to bring over the batch of cookies and chocolate they had prepared earlier that day. Upon receiving the basket, the peddler's business-minded eye immediately noticed the unique and eye-catching packaging of these products. Just the visual presentation of it alone was enough to entice any would-be customers who looked at the product. The violet and gold paper-like wrapping also showed a sense of both luxury and necessity. It looked like the kind of product that was expensive but was worth the price. "This is what you're selling?" the veteran peddler asked Michael. His eyes no longer showed any confusion. This little demonstration of the Reborn products already told the veteran peddler that he was dealing with someone extremely skilled and knowledgeable in the area of business. After all, his nose was itching. His body was telling him that he might be holding onto a piece of product that could bring him tons of profits. Michael probably knew that, and that was why he asked to meet with the peddlers. "This is just a mock-up of our eventual chocolate line of products, so the design is not finished yet. We weren't planning on selling the chocolate yet, but as fate would have it, you guys appeared here at the perfect time." The veteran peddler took one of the chocolate bars and took it off its paper wrapping. A sweet smell wafted to his nose. He took a single bite, and the rush of sugar exploded in his mouth, surprising him. "Senior," the other peddlers were alarmed. "I'm okay," the veteran said, waving off their concern. "This chocolate, is it made out of sugar?" "Sugar." The rest of the peddlers rummaged through their baskets and took out their chocolate bars, unwrapping them and taking a bite in a single move. Upon feeling the chocolate melt in their mouths, their eyes widened, and a moment later, they dove in and ate the whole thing in a couple of bites. Michael watched on with a satisfied smile. "Try the other one. We call that the chocolate chip cookie." They began to unwrap the cylindrical wrapper, showing a few stacks of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. They tasted it too, and liked it even better than just pure chocolate. These cookies could be eaten for breakfast, lunch, or dinner without the taste getting bland. "I'm sure that as peddlers, you know the proper market to sell this kind of snack, right?" The veteran peddler nodded. "These will be popular in the big cities, where the population is on the younger side. It will probably do great in the capital cities." Michael thought so as well. If he played the marketing of his products right, then he could replicate the culture of chocolate giving during times of anniversaries or birthdays. Back in his old world, Valentine's Day was celebrated globally, with the selling of flowers and chocolates spiking up. "What do you think? Do you want to become chocolate merchants?" Michael's question made the peddlers look at their veteran leader. Whatever he decided, they would decide too. The veteran looked at the golden R stamped onto the very chocolate itself, clearly showing the name of the Reborn company and letting it imprint onto anyone's mind every time they bit into the chocolate. It was brilliant. That was how the veteran peddler described the Reborn company's ideas. And it wasn't just their chocolates. It was everything else in this town as well. The free-flowing water, the flat roads, and the monstrous horseless carriages as well. The Reborn company was ahead of the game, and it would only be a matter of time until their waves washed over to the Queen's region. And by that point, it would already be too late for a small-time peddler like him to join. This was the only time he could join. He could still ride the wave and it will take them to the top. This was a life-changing decision. "Yes, please. We would like to sell these chocolates," the veteran proudly accepted. Michael stood up and faced the peddlers, shaking their hands one by one. "Now, here's my proposal. I want you to sell these products everywhere in the Queen's region, with a certain percentage of the sales going to you as commission." Michael began to elaborate on their arrangement for this business. He told them how much the chocolates were going to be sold for, which was just above the average price of a normal pastry. It was on the expensive end, but still affordable. A fraction of that price would be their earnings, which surprised the peddlers as it was a much better deal than they were even hoping for. After all, they didn't even have to buy the chocolates. They would just have to sell them. "Oh, and if you have any more merchant friends, make sure to tell them about this opportunity. Maybe they want to become chocolate merchants too." Chapter 175. Peddlers Seeing Potential. The Rebornians were quite accommodating as they quickly arranged for the peddlers to have their own lodging for the night, which they sorely needed because it had been quite a whirlwind of events for the peddlers. They would not be weirded out if they woke up the next day and found that everything had just been a dream. Yet the next day, after they finalized their agreement with Michael and the Reborn company, they were still here, standing on the newly constructed flat roads with horseless carriages crossing the streets. This was real. And even though it had only been a day, they saw that some parts of the town suddenly had flat concrete roads magically out of nowhere. They knew nothing about construction, but they knew that this kind of speed was insane. From what they heard from the Rebornians, it seemed that this was still considered slow for them. Compared to the manpower they had in the King's region, the speed of production in Neo Orcus was like comparing a single drop from a bucketful. Last night, they chatted with some of the locals and the Dragonborns about their experiences in the King's region. They heard all kinds of stories about stars landing on the ground, exciting baseball games, booming music, and something about an air conditioning unit of some kind. They didn't understand anything, but their curiosity for the King's region and the nation of Reborn piqued from the description alone. What more if they experienced it firsthand? If they didn't have a job to do in the Queen's region, then the Peddlers would have wanted to visit the King's region and try out the automobile taxi in Kingsbridge. They heard that a week's worth of travel was slashed down to only one day. As peddlers, they were incredibly fascinated with the thought of owning an automobile. "It's decided. I'll save up for a car," the rookie peddler announced. The locals of Neo Orcus toasted to the new guy, as they too wanted to buy an automobile of their own. The peddlers had to stay in Neo Orcus for a couple more days as they waited for the production of the chocolate and cookie products they were going to sell. To pass the time, they frequently roamed around Neo Orcus, familiarizing themselves with the new structures and design of the town. They were amazed at how complex and beautiful everything was despite how fast they were building it. One particular day, they came across Michael and his dragonborn attendants looking over the remnants of the northern gate of Neo Orcus. Usually, it was just the Rebornian engineers overseeing the construction, but this time, it looked like even the big boss was involved. "I wonder what they're building over there," the rookie peddler asked out loud. The veteran stopped in his tracks as he realized where he was. This used to be the genesis, the first step towards the Golden Road," he muttered under his breath. Even though the structures and the old architecture were gone, the veteran peddler still recognized the vastness and grandiosity of the road on the horizon. It used to symbolize a literal road to wealth for most aspiring merchants, including him. The other peddlers knew about the Golden Road but were born too late to witness its prime, only its decline. "Excuse me, Sir Michael, but are you doing what I think you're doing?" The veteran peddler saw the very beginnings of road construction on the gates. Metal rebars were ready to be installed underground, with only the liquid concrete needed to finally start its construction. "Yes, you've guessed right," Michael replied. "I'm trying to rebuild the Golden Road." Just hearing those words come out of Michael's mouth almost made the veteran peddler shiver. He didn't know if he was afraid or excited, probably a mix of both. "Are you really undertaking this task? Are you not worried? Is it even possible?" "Yes, even if it isn't," Michael replied confidently. The Dragonborns beside him smiled, showing their complete faith and devotion to Michael. There was a fire in their eyes that showed their desire to fulfill his wishes, with no option for failure. They weren't the only ones. Practically every Rebornian shared the same passion for furthering Michael's goals. "Yeah, I'll punch anyone that gets in our way," Zion said, punching the air excitedly. "Lord Michael doesn't have to do anything. We will be enough," Shiina said casually. Seeing this, the veteran peddler had a premonition that they would be the one to finally reestablish the Golden Road to its prime condition. It must be said that this new Golden Road would be completely different from the old one. There was a distinct difference between the two, and it was the fact that the Reborn Company was able to plant their flag into Neo Orcus before anyone else. This was a crucial point that would give them the edge over anyone else from the very start. If Michael was able to restart the popularity of the Golden Road, then the Reborn Company would also be taken up with it. The two names would practically be synonymous with each other. Once that happened, nobody would be able to refute it. It was written in a binding contract. The Reborn Company secured its spot in one of the most crucial points in the Queen's region without anyone even knowing about it. Even if others knew it beforehand, they would disregard it as nothing important. In their eyes, Orcus Town had already degraded past its usefulness. They would think that only a fool would sink so much time and money into making Orcus Town functional as a society. But they didn't know what the nation of Reborn could do as a whole. Michael had the help of the dwarves. He had dragonborns whose power was comparable to the top adventurers in the Queen's region, and most of all, he had amazing products that could sweep the entire continent in one fell swoop. If there was anyone who could do this nigh impossible task, then it was none other than Michael and his Reborn company. Chapter 176. Angora City. A few days later, the Peddlers finally took off from Neo Orcus and began their journey to the Queen's region. Their rucksacks had been emptied out and replaced with Reborn products such as soap, shampoo, and most of all, chocolates and cookies. Their targeted destination would be the capital city of Angora, with a population of about 100,000 humans and demi-humans alike. The cookies would only last for 2 to 3 weeks, which was good since their trip would last about a week at the most. It would have taken only a few days if they were traveling through the old Golden Road, but because there was still a large crack in the middle of the path, they had to go through the long way, trekking mountains and all that stuff. As experienced travelers, they were already used to these long trips, so the days went by in a flash. In the blink of an eye, they stood on top of a cliff overlooking the capital city Angora just on the horizon. They saw horse carriages coming in and out of the city even from a distance, which only showed how bustling the market was over there. It remained as busy as they remembered. The magic tower in the distance still towered over everything, with almost invisible magic particles emanating off of the very structure itself and protecting the city from unwanted weather effects. The castle on the side was as grand as ever, with a moat surrounding the housing for the lord of the city. Beside it was a large academic court, meant for the training of squires and knights from the Order of the Heavenly Knights. Their very presence in the city gave a sense of peace and security to the citizens. Those 3 institutions were vital for a territory to be called a capital city. It enticed people to settle down and be part of their community, with families moving there to have a chance at enrolling at the Order or the Guild of Arcana. The peddlers entered the city and began to unload their products in their designated stalls in the market. They were surrounded by more established businesses with their permanent stores in the best locations in the city, so they were met with a lot of competition. Most customers already knew what they wanted to buy, so they just walked along and ignored the new and unknown chocolate products from the peddlers. It took them a few hours before someone finally took notice of the strange purple and gold wrappers stacked in their stalls. "Oh, Mommy, what's that?" A child wearing leather armor tugged on his mother's skirt. The mother looked back at her son and tried to hurry him forward. But as she looked at the products stacked on the table, she was intrigued by their unique design and enticing wrappers. It looked luxurious compared to the other products in the market, which only used a simple leaf or paper as a wrapper. "Excuse me, what is this?" the mother asked the veteran peddler. "Madam, you have made the right choice in asking. This is none other than the newest exotic product we found as we traveled the whole region. It is called chocolate, which is famed to be even sweeter than sugar itself. We will give you a little sampler to taste for free. Do you want to try it out, madam?" The son looked up at his mother, performing his best pity eyes. "Please, Mom. I want it to be my good luck charm for when I pass the test to become a trainee for the order. Please, Mom." The peddler took out 2 pieces of chocolates and 2 pieces of cookies and gave it out to them. Even though it was no longer freshly baked, the rich and warm scent coming off of the chocolates was enough to make the mother and son take a bite out of each. And as soon the chocolate melted in their mouths, they were sold. Even the mother couldn't believe how much she liked cookies. It was even better than the bread being sold by the largest bakery in the city. The mother bought a lot of chocolates for her son and cookies for herself. The best part about it was that the wrapping and presentation of the products were so good that it would be a good gift idea for anyone. There were a couple more people who bought chocolate throughout the day, but as expected, not a lot of people bought their products on the first day. However, those who bought one yesterday ended up buying more the next day, which slowly built up their customer base each day. It was slow at first, but as the days rolled on, more and more people found out about its unique sweet flavor that couldn't be found anywhere else. Coincidentally, the boy who had bought chocolates on the first day ended up getting accepted into the Order of the Heavenly Knights as a trainee. His mother eventually ended up buying lots of chocolate for her son as a congratulatory gift, which caught the attention of the other parents in her circle of friends. One such parent approached the mother of the boy and congratulated them for this achievement. "Hey, my compliments to your son for passing the physical exam. Any tips or secrets I should know about for my son to pass his exam? I'm sure your son will pass it too. They both trained at the same time, right?" The mother assured them, but the curious parent was unconvinced. There was something that changed with that boy when he went to take his entrance exam. "Any advice will help," the parent pleaded. Maybe there is one thing that can help your kid." "What is it?" "There's this thing that my son bought during the day of his exam. When he ate it, he seemed to be a lot more active, a lot more energetic than usual." "Ho? What is it? Maybe I'll buy one for my son too." Chapter 177. Trainees from the Order. There was something strange going on with the current selection of trainees from the Order of the Heavenly Knights. Usually, these kids would be exhausted beyond belief at the end of their training sessions, with some ending up being carried back to their dorms from the intense muscle spasms they incurred throughout the day. However, some of the instructors realized that these days, the new trainees had been quite energetic, even after making them run laps around the grounds 2 times the normal amount. They even looked more excited as the 8th candle had been extinguished, signaling their time for rest. Usually, the instructors wouldn't care about the dealings of the children after training, but they realized that those who had been showing strange behaviors were the ones who were performing quite well in the physical tests. For example, some of the students who were stuck at the 1-star physical arts core were showing signs of having a breakthrough, even though they showed no talent for this a couple of days ago. This coincided perfectly when the students suddenly exhibited this strange behavior at the end of the day. Finally, the instructors had enough. They decided to follow the children and see what they were up to. "Okay, trainees, wipe off your sweats and go straight to your dorms. We'll have our monthly exam tomorrow to gauge your current levels," a burly man said to his students, returning the wooden sword to its scabbard. "Yes, sire," the kids replied, saluting to him. And as their instructor left the training grounds, the kids huddled up to each other with excitement bubbling up to their faces. "Guys, we have to hurry. We can't be late or else it'll be sold out when we get there," one kid said. "I'm going to need to stock up more for tomorrow. I need it or else I think I'll fail. Just remember, don't tell anyone or else we'll have more competition." The rest of the trainees nodded their heads. Then, they put their hands together and cheered silently. 1, 2, 3, chocolates. Chocolates! They whispered to themselves. As it turned out, the reason why these kids had been acting weird was because of none other than chocolate itself. After a rumor spread that one of the trainees got accepted after eating chocolates, eventually every trainee wanted to eat one for themselves too. The results were evident, as they felt themselves with more energy to spend after eating a whole bar of chocolate for a single day. So, at the end of their training sessions, the trainees rushed out to the market to seek out the peddlers selling chocolate and cookies. However, as the days passed, more and more people found the amazing taste of chocolate and cookies and began buying them en masse. It was unfortunate for the kids as their training only ended by sunset, so by the time they visited the market, the chocolate stocks were almost emptied out. And as they reached the peddlers' stalls, they were delighted to see that there were still some stacks of chocolate on display. "Excuse me, sir. We would like to buy a chocolate bar for each of us," the trainees shouted. The veteran peddler recognized the kids and immediately packed a stack for them. "Will you be buying 8 chocolate bars this time?" the peddler asked. The trainees shook their heads. "Only 7, mister. There's only 7 of us." "Then who is he?" The veteran peddler then pointed to the large burly man behind the kids. "So this is what you've been buying." That strict voice made the trainees jump in fear. They turned around and were horrified to see their instructor looking down at them with his arms crossed on his chest. He was mad. That was the look he gave them whenever he would make them do 10 more laps. They eventually had to tell him everything and explain why they sneaked out of their dorms to visit the market. "Chocolates, huh?" The instructor felt intrigued after hearing about the effects of chocolate on the trainees. If the kids were to be believed, then chocolates almost had the same effects as cultivation pills and elixirs for a fraction of the price. "Are we in trouble, sire?" The instructor eyed the trainees. "Yes, you are. You shouldn't have kept this to yourselves. Could have helped the other trainees become stronger as well. Next time, buy more for the rest of the class. Instead of getting lectured for sneaking out of the dorms, the instructor actually encouraged them to go out and buy more chocolates for other trainees so that they could enjoy the benefits as well. So, for the next few days, everyone visiting the market would see trainees, squires, and even some knights lining up in a queue. It was a curious sight, with other people finally taking notice of the chocolate bars and cookies that the traveling peddlers sold on the market. After all, if people from the Order of the Heavenly Knights were interested in these products, then it must be something good. And sure enough, once they tasted the sweetness of the Reborn chocolate products, they were hooked just like the trainees. It took a couple of days, but the sales finally picked up for the chocolate merchants, with most of their stock getting emptied out by midday. Of course, this kind of sensation was quickly spread throughout Angora City. It even reached the lord of the city's ears, who had his attendants secretly buy chocolate for him and his family to try out. Because of this, the newspaper companies finally took notice. They sent out a rookie journalist to find out more about these chocolate and cookie products that everybody had been raving about. But they didn't send out a veteran. They didn't think it could become front-page news. At most, it would be a good anecdote in their newspaper. But in truth, who knew what would happen if they dug a little deeper and found out more about the Reborn Company? Chapter 178. The Journalist. The rookie journalist's first mission was to interview the peddlers who introduced the exotic chocolate products to the city. He left his house early and went to the market. The funny thing was that he didn't even have to know where the peddlers were located. All he had to do was follow the large queue in the street, and they would lead him to the chocolate merchants located in a very obscure part of the market. Usually, this place wasn't visited much by customers. But as the chocolate products got more popular, this part of the market ended up becoming more crowded than the main street. "Excuse me, sir. My name is Jimmy from Queen's News. Do you have a bit of time for an interview?" The rookie journalist asked as he approached the peddlers manning the busy stalls. "Sure. I'll gladly answer any questions you have about Reborn chocolates," the veteran peddler answered happily, even though he was busy counting coins for the customers' change. Jimmy looked over at his notes and began with the very first question he prepared. "Where did you get these chocolates from?" The veteran peddler smiled and said, "It came from Neo Orcus." Even without any follow-up questions, the peddler voluntarily told the story about how they ended up becoming chocolate merchants. They told Jimmy that they used to be traveling peddlers who wanted to visit the rundown Orcus town, but found it to be completely different from what they expected. Of course, the fact that the Reborn Company was the one who made it all happen was a topic that the peddler went into quite deeply. He told Jimmy about the plumbing system, the concrete roads, and even the automobile trucks that ran on nothing but oil. As Jimmy kept listening, his eyes started to narrow. He had just graduated from school, and this story would be the first one he covered in his career. He was quite disappointed that he wasn't allowed to cover big stories like the pact between the Ocean King and the Draconic Queen, but he thought it would be good to start somewhere small. At least that's what he thought. That's what his bosses thought as well. But according to these peddlers, it seemed that the story about chocolates went further beyond what anyone could even think of. A new company in the Queen's region with more advanced technology than even the best cities? It sounded like a lie that a drunkard would tell in a bar. It was unbelievable for others to hear about this, especially more so for Jimmy, who came from a journalistic background. It was his job to know everything about the current events of the Queen's region. But he heard neither a peep nor a squeal about something as big as the peddlers were portraying the Reborn Company to be. Of course, the authenticity of their words was yet to be verified. Any other senior journalist would have disregarded their stories as nothing more than hyperbole, a lie to sensationalize their chocolate products to make them look more interesting to customers. Many reporters wouldn't want to publish this kind of story because newspaper readers would deem their story as a lie, therefore damaging their reputation as journalists. However, Jimmy had a feeling in his gut, an intuition, so to speak, that there was at least a kernel of truth in the chocolate merchant stories. If he were to take the risk and see the truth for himself, then it could end up jump-starting his career as a journalist. This could either go one of two ways. Either this story would have him retiring from writing even before he began, or have him become a sought-after journalist covering the most interesting story in the last 100 years. If he were to believe the chocolate merchants, then the Reborn company wasn't just a breakthrough business that discovered a new tasty snack. It was the growl of a newly matured tiger about to show its fangs to the whole world. Jimmy realized that chocolates may just be the preview of what's to come. He even had the feeling that the Reborn company could someday enter the Golden 500, a ranking compiled by journalists and newspapers about the biggest companies and conglomerates from the entire world. The Golden 500 was a ranking that considered different criteria such as monetary value, territorial cover, individual talent, and even army strength. Jimmy thought that the Reborn company still wasn't established enough to have a lot of territory under their banner. After all, they were still unknown in the Queen's region with not a lot of reach. And without seeing the Reborn company himself, Jimmy didn't know if they had any physically gifted fighters in their midst. With how advanced their technology was, it might be possible that they only focused on research and development of their products, leaving no effort to develop their magic. But from what he saw with their chocolate products, the Reborn company had a very good chance of accruing a lot of monetary value if they kept selling their chocolate products. And if the merchants were to be believed, then they had other products that could be sold for a high price as well. There was a lot of potential with the Reborn company. If he were to estimate the Reborn company's value today through the potential of chocolates, then they could potentially enter the Golden 500, maybe at the 495th spot. This kind of news would quickly spread like wildfire. After all, it wasn't every day that an unknown company would suddenly burst through the rankings without any warning. Jimmy decided there and then he was going to visit Neo Orcus and see the Reborn company for himself. He asked the chocolate merchants for directions, and fortunately for him, it turned out that they were just about to return to Neo Orcus to stock up on some more chocolate products. You should join us in our caravan back to Neo Orcus. There are also a few other peddlers that want to become chocolate merchants as well, so you could join them too. Chapter 179, Physical Arts Mana Flow. Back in Neo Orcus, Michael and Fudge watched on with a curious attitude as Agnes and Jakku faced off against each other in a one-on-one sparring match. After the Rebornians taught Yuna's demi-human escorts about baseball, they reciprocated the favor by teaching them some much-needed lessons about physical arts. Agnes was the famous battle maid of the Montgomery family, with lots of life-or-death experiences under her belt. So, she had a lot to teach the newly evolved Dragonborns, who despite their potential, were still wet behind the ears. "How strong is your attendant, really?" Michael asked Yuna, who was sitting beside him petting a sleepy Fudge. She's a renowned 7-star physical arts user personally taught by Kruger, a heavenly knight from the Order Master of the Way of the Axe, who, by the way, is also an orc. Michael looked at Agnes and saw how orderly the mana inside her body was. They flowed with synchronicity in her veins as she moved, enhancing her physical strength with no wasted energy or strength. Meanwhile, Jakku had mastery over ridiculous amounts of mana, but barely no control over them. That was the difference in experience between both of them. "I will begin," Agnes warned Jakku as she raised her double-edged battle axe in the air. "Please go easy on me," Jakku said jokingly as he adopted a low stance. But he kept his right hand on the hilt of his sword, ready for any sudden movements. Agnes took a step forward and swung her axe. In a split second, Agnes' body blurred and disappeared from her original spot, reappearing just in front of Jakku with her battle axe ready to swing down towards his body. Jakku was caught off guard for a moment before he drew out his sword, letting its blade meet with the axe in the air. The two weapons clashed, with sparks flying off at the moment of impact. If it weren't for his skill, 1,000 bolts, which allowed him to have reaction times as fast as lightning, then he wouldn't have been able to defend himself against Agnes. The ogre battle maid raised her eyebrows, impressed that Jakku was able to take on one of her attacks. She lowered her strength to the point of being barely stronger than Jakku, yet he showed a surprising quickness that was able to deflect her attack. "I'll take it up a notch," she warned the Dragonborn. Michael saw the tiniest bit of fire mana erupt from her body, which directly translated to a great boost in every physical aspect of her body. She retracted her axe and swung it wide, intending to separate Jakku's lower half from his upper half. Jakku tried to parry the axe but found it to be too heavy to slow down. Her sword continued to swing unimpeded towards his waist, forcing him to take a step back. But with a single step, Agnes caught up to him and continued to batter him with heavy swings that broke any sort of posture or stance that he had been preparing. Unable to defend, much less attack, Jakku was forced to run away. Well, at least tried to. Meanwhile, Michael leaned towards the fight as he observed the mana flow in Agnes' body. ChatJK3, are you seeing this? Analyzing magic flow. Adding newfound knowledge to the memory bank. He found a lot of differences between physical art spells and the mystical art spells that he had been so familiar with. The most glaring difference would be their mana cores. For example, his mana core and the mana cores of someone like Cerberus Augendor were positioned near the abdomen. This was what mages called the dantion. And because it was a source of mana for casting mystical arts, the mana cores were freely floating in their own spaces, completely avoiding any other organ of the body. This was because mana cores were filled with mana and were therefore overflowing with energy. Having it close to vital organs was tantamount to exposing it to an open campfire. In other words, they would burn, and quickly too. Mana cores can be thought of as the cartridge of a gun, with mana being the actual bullets. Mystical arts users cast spells with the magic theory, which would act like an actual gun. This gun would be accessing the cartridge and taking a bullet so that they could fire it out of the body. Now, as long as the mage points the gun away from their body, then they wouldn't be affected by the explosive power of the bullet in any way. But for physical arts users, that was exactly the opposite of what they were doing. They were essentially pointing the gun toward their body and firing the bullet at themselves. But somehow, physical arts users were able to wire themselves in such a way that they would get empowered by that bullet instead of getting destroyed by it. The way they did it was by spreading out their mana throughout their body evenly, as opposed to the mages who concentrated their mana as dense as possible to make the energy burst out and create a bigger spell. By spreading out the mana, their body would be able to endure its volatile energy and transform it into overwhelming physical power. And because of this, Agnes' internal body changed drastically over time. Her veins were connected to her very mana cores, allowing mana to be distributed evenly in the same way that blood spread throughout her body. It was truly a different experience seeing something firsthand from a veteran. Assimilating flow of physical arts mana. Completed. Michael felt the mana cores inside his body rumble, with elemental mana particles reaching out into his very body and trying to connect to his veins the same way that Agnes assimilated her mana cores to hers. As he did, he slowly felt the pure volatile energy of the elemental mana course through his entire body. If any other person tried to forcefully do this without the proper training and exercise required, then they would find their blood turning into steam as the pure energy of the elemental mana heats their body like a furnace. But Michael was different from everybody. He had a supreme skill, which allowed him complete control over all elemental mana. Chapter 180. Unfair Talents. This kind of reckless attempt at becoming a physical arts user would certainly be fatal for most people. This was especially so because Michael's cores contained all elements, which when combined would create unity, a very explosive combination that could level an entire city to the ground. But for Michael, the unity flowing in his veins felt reminiscent of the bathhouses he constructed in the Vanderbilt estate. It was warm at most. He was able to bear through it just like how he was able to pass through the ball of fire from the Godforge. The unity, instead of destroying his very body from the inside, started to nurture it with immense power and energy, allowing it to undergo a rejuvenation that strengthened his entire body. His bones cracked under the pressure and were immediately repaired. His muscles tore from the bulging of the veins but were quickly sewn back together. His tendons, his ligaments, and his cartilage were worn down before being replaced by something more resilient. This was all possible because of the increased energy received by his body from the unity mana. It boosted the production of cells, therefore allowing his body to create new parts in a matter of a few seconds. Veins slithered through his muscles, bones, and organs before finally reaching the elemental cores. It created a kind of a spider's nest as the interconnecting veins formed an octagonal pattern in his dantion. With his body physically connected to his mana cores, the flow of unity throughout his body could finally be controlled at a slower pace. The volatile unity mana stopped its rampage, returning to his mana cores obediently. Now, they would only flow through his veins and supply his body with power only when needed. Ha! Michael opened his eyes and looked at his body. He opened his palms and felt himself a lot more connected with it physically and mentally. Master, are you okay? You've been having a strange expression for a while now. Fudge noticed Michael's silence as well as the cold sweat forming on his forehead. Michael smiled and patted Fudge. I'm fine, Fudge. Yuna looked at Michael with a strange expression. There was something different about him. She just couldn't explain it. What happened? She asked him. I broke through. Michael experienced a breakthrough in his physique, allowing his body to become stronger and more resilient just like a well-trained warrior. In truth, Michael had been neglecting his physical well-being for these past few years. After all, with his absolute unity defense and his magic, he didn't have to lift a single finger to protect himself or exert any effort. But just through observing how a real physical arts master used mana in their body, Michael was able to assimilate their technique and turn it into his own. Michael looked at his cores and found it to have increased in size substantially. It seemed that the combination of the unity mana allowed Michael to finally become a 5-star mage. As Michael experienced the highs of transcending a stage in his cultivation, the two sparring partners were none the wiser. Jakku was using all of his instincts just to survive the onslaught from Agnes' heavy-handed attacks. Meanwhile, Agnes kept her eyes on Jakku's movements, surprised at each time he exceeded her expectations of his performance. At the start of the fight, she used nothing but her physical strength to wear him down, bringing down her axe towards him with just enough force to make his arms tremble from the weight of her swing. She even adjusted her speed to just barely be above that of what he could see and react to. Yet as the fight continued, she realized that Jakku had been contesting against her axe, with each clash becoming more and more equal in heaviness. His weaknesses such as his blind spots and his foot positioning were slowly getting fixed in the middle of the fight. It would only take one mistake for him to learn his lesson the next time, changing his positioning to cover any weakness. But that wasn't all. The most impressive thing she saw about him was his mana flow. She could feel the mana emanating from his body and leaking out into his sword, giving it a sharpness that wasn't there previously. Somehow, he was naturally learning the correct mana flow through mere intuition and practice alone. She could practically see his body getting filled with mana from his cores, slowly transforming his body into one suited for physical arts. At this point, she wouldn't be surprised if it would only take him a month to fully connect his veins to his mana cores. Sometimes the heavens were truly unfair. It took Agnes a full year of pure training and physical torment before she could achieve a vein connection. And if it wasn't for her master, she reckoned it would have taken her a lot longer. For now, Jakku was still only using a very crude version of mana flow. He was just pouring mana into his body without any thought behind it, making it a lot less efficient with a lot less power. But with a little bit more help, she could see Jakku becoming a totally different beast that even she would have to be careful of. A slightly transparent fire erupted around Agnes' body as she used one of her skills. She changed her stance to a one-handed axe and swung it towards Jakku. He seemed to have expected this and redirected its course by letting it slide across his sword backward. Jakku thought this would be his chance to finally create a counterattack. As soon as the axe missed his chest, he turned around and used the momentum to stab his sword towards Agnes' weak spot, just below her hand carrying her axe. But he was surprised to see Agnes already close up in front of him, with her other hand balled up into a fist, ready to strike his stomach in point-blank range. "It's over," Agnes said as she punched with the power of fire, sending Jakku flying through the air and colliding with a tree.